In the 1980s, minors from poor backgrounds and other groups known as desecurables rapidly disappeared from Colombia's streets. Due to decades of conflict, victims are unlikely to be reported missing. On November 7, 1998, a group of children playing soccer in Pereira discovered skeletal remains. However, authorities did not pay much attention to the disease until November 15, when a mass grave of up to 36 children, almost all boys, was found with broken bones, sexual assault, and prolonged torture, found with traces. They found a total of 41 children in the Risaralda department, and 27 in neighboring Valle del Cauca. The killer left behind cash and burned his glasses, shorts, shoes, and underwear. Receipts and a note with Graciela Zabaleta's address were also found. Using his glasses, authorities determined that the local serial killer was middle-aged and had astigmatism in his left eye, leading them to the real culprit, Luis Garavito, also known as the Beast. Welcome to Rotten Crimes, where the darkest chapters of human history are laid bare. Before we embark on today's chilling tale of Luis Garavito, the Beast, take a moment to hit that thumbs up button if you're ready to explore the depths of human darkness. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell to stay updated on our bone-chilling stories. Today, we delve into the spine-chilling saga of one of the most infamous figures in criminal history, Luis Garavito. His haunting legacy reverberates through time, as his heinous acts shocked a nation and highlighted the vulnerability of the most marginalized. Join us as we navigate the harrowing tale of a serial killer whose name evokes fear and whose crimes defy comprehension. Brace yourself for a journey into the depths of darkness as we uncover the chilling story of Luis Garavito. Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos was born on January 25, 1957, in Genoa, Quindío, to Manuel Antonio Garavito and Rosa Delia Cubillos. He had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. Mr. Garavito said his father was an adulterous, drunkard, macho man, very strict, and often physically and emotionally abusive throughout his childhood, and his mother was a violent woman. He said he never showed him any love or affection. He attended Simón Bolívar School in Ceilán, and although he was initially cooperative and cheerful, he was often ridiculed and bullied by other children. Around 1968, he left school in the 5th grade because his memory was poor and his father insisted on earning money to support his family. In 1969, when Garavito's father went to the store to get vaccinated, Garavito was reportedly subjected to severe physical and sexual abuse by a local drug store owner and religious neighbors. During his sexual abuse, Garavito said his neighbor tied him to a bed and sexually abused him, then burned him several times with a candle, cut him with a razor blade, and bit his genitals and buttocks. He claimed to have done so. The severity of this abuse and Garavito's various other claims of extreme abuse were later questioned by several experts and interviewers. After this first incident of abuse, Garavito allegedly killed and dissected 2 of his birds out of frustration, which immediately triggered feelings of remorse and shame. In 1971 his family moved to Trujillo, and he was shown heterosexual pornography by another neighboring family friend. Because Garavito responded with disgust, the neighbor beat him into the undergrowth before raping him. In 1972, Garavito aggressively and repeatedly attempted to initiate sexual relations with women, but these advances were rejected. A rebellious young man, Garavito was briefly evicted in 1972 after being caught by his mother attempting to rape a 5-year-old boy, and again in 1973 following an attempted sexual assault on a 6-year-old boy at a train station in Bogotá. The boy screamed, which alerted authorities to arrest Garavito, who stated he only wanted to lightly molest the child in response to an attempted rape charge. Working life. Garavito began his adult life as an assistant at the Compensation Fund and later worked in a chain of retail stores. Despite his newfound success, he began to struggle with his colleagues, clients, and bosses, which escalated into physical confrontations. After he lost his job, he sold religious icons as a street vendor and worked as a migrant worker. In 1973, as a young man, Garavito began working on a coffee plantation in Trujillo. He fell in love with a single mother who was a schoolteacher. He went on to attend weekly mass services with her. Most of the women he dated had children, which Garavito adopted as his own, as well as being a loving friend when sober. His friends also described him as amicable despite his violent temper, and sometimes drunken states where he vowed to kill his father. He also became increasingly jealous, controlling, and belittling his female partners, leading to repeated evictions in later life. In 1970, Garavito suffered from symptoms of psychosis, paranoia, and depression, and began compulsively abusing children of both sexes, with an almost exclusive preference for adolescent boys. Due to depression and suicidal thoughts related to his declining performance, he expressed his desire to have a family. In a drunken state, Garavito insisted on having sex with his partner. Nevertheless, he frequently suffered from erectile dysfunction, which caused him great distress and often led him to complain of hatred towards his family. Garavito gradually developed alcoholism and began attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in 1978. Garavito also converted to the Pentecostal faith and worked as a store clerk, where he reunited with his first girlfriend, Luz Mary. He was estranged from his family and was only close to his older sister Esther, who avoided him due to her alcoholism. Garavito also harbored resentment towards his younger brothers who defended his father, whom he felt had been favored by his father during his childhood. Garavito moved to Armenia City and took a new job at a local bakery. After frequently attending services at a local church and repeatedly beating his chest in remorse during prayer, Garavito attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and, after occasional visits to a psychiatrist, became a child prostitute. The day ended with frequent visits to Valencia Park to take advantage of the services. In 1980, Garavito's employment at the bakery was terminated for provoking a fight with his coworkers. Following this failed attempt, Garavito sought psychiatric care at the San Juan de Dios Hospital and was repeatedly hospitalized throughout the spring of 1980, where he expressed a desire to die over a belief that his life was worth nothing. He was primarily treated for his diagnosed depression in spite of evident psychosis and bulimia. He was, however, prescribed antipsychotic medication. Intent on being truthful with the psychiatrist, Garavito stated he wanted to have children, before misdirecting this statement into implying he wanted to start a family. Discovering Adolf Hitler's book Mein Kampf, Garavito became fond of Hitler upon discovering similarities in their early lives, homosexual experiences, and years spent in vagrancy. This fondness developed into idolization, expressing admiration for Hitler, mass graves of the Holocaust, and stating that he liked the concentration camps. On January 25, 1984, Garavito was housed under psychiatric care for 33 days following a mental breakdown. He was prescribed antipsychotic medication and referred to psychotherapy for his depression. After obtaining a permit to leave on February 28, 1984, Garavito fled to Pereira where he immediately molested, burned, and bit 2 children in the sector of Getsemani before leaving their photographs with his older sister. Having molested and tortured more than 100 children by this period, Garavito was briefly detained for stealing jewelry from a friend. During this period, Garavito found another girlfriend named Graciela Zabalita, a single mother who resided near the local psychiatric centers in which he was committed. Starting in 1988, Garavito began documenting his crimes, keeping trophies from his victims in black cloth suitcases at several females' residences. Between 1980 and 1992, Garavito was estimated to have raped and tortured a minimum of 200 youths, a period during which he had actively spent 5 years under psychiatric care, having attempted suicide several times. Attempting to commit his first murder on October 1, 1992, Garavito sought a young boy who had been selling sweets and cigars to passers-by. Committing his first murder of a boy named Juan Carlos on October 4, 1992, Garavito began wearing various disguises in order to evade identification and arrest. For years, Garavito documented his crimes with tickets, receipts, clothes, and identity cards of victims in a black cloth suitcase. Garavito left the suitcase with his sister Esther before giving it to Luz Mary. In June 1996, Garavito complained to Luz Mary about losing his temporary job as a salesman for air fresheners, begging for a place to stay in exchange for food and financial relief. Stricken with pain, he resided temporarily with a man before begging his girlfriend Luz Mary to let him stay at her residence again. Luz Mary subsequently evicted Garavito, who derided her son as disrespectful and rude and had also damaged a gold chain she had gifted to him. Later that year on Christmas Day, Luz Mary received a gift from a visiting friend, which prompted an angry, drunken phone call from Garavito, who stated that he didn't like those faggots visiting, as he feared they would steal her generosity from Garavito. After several hours, Garavito left an apology note asking for her forgiveness and noting his damage to their household. Local people started to call him conflict due to his domestic disputes with coworkers, abuse of his girlfriends, and general inability to behave normally. Garavito began to feel apathy for his crimes. On October 4, 1992, he spotted 13-year-old Juan Carlos walking near a bazaar where he had been drinking. He began to follow the child, buying synthetic rope and a butcher's knife on the way, before offering him work for 500 or 1,000 pesos. The boy left the crowded area in Jamundi with Garavito to go to a remote area near the local railroad, where he was later found with his front teeth knocked out, severe cuts to his rectum and throat, and his genitals severed. Waking upon sunrise, Garavito allegedly cried upon seeing the blood stains of Carlos on his clothes. Garavito then killed 12-year-old John Alexander Penaranda on his way to his sister's apartment in Tulua. He then began forcibly killing young people, mostly men living in poverty, and collecting their severed toes. In 1993, Garavito disemboweled his victims and lured 8 youths between the ages of 9 and 11 from a local school to a nearby wooded area in La Victoria Parish. Fearing he would be chased by bloodhounds, Garavito went to southeast Bogotá to find Henry Giovanni Garcia, Marco Aurelio Castano, Juan David Cardenas, Jamie Orlando Popayan, and 3 others. He threw away his severed toes before killing the unidentified children. He then killed 2 more children in the Maisan area before heading to Tulua, Pereira, and Quimbaya, before returning to Tulua where he murdered more children, resulting in the death of 13-year-old Mauricio Monedero Mejia in 1993. In early 1994, Garavito lured a boy from Bogotá, estimated to be 12 years old, from falling asleep on a bus. After giving the boy brandy, Garavito panicked and began to remove his clothes and tie him up in a secluded part of the ravine, before noticing a strange smell. Later, he released his child after it was discovered that the source of the smell was a mass grave. The child quickly grabbed a knife and used the weapon to cut the tendons in Garavit's left hand before Garavit overpowered him and killed him. On February 4, 1994, Garavito lured 13-year-old Jamie Andres Gonzalez out of Plaza Bolivar and into a sugarcane field, shortly after he had been kicked out of a bar that night for complaining about the food. When he noticed a cross nearby, he went into a brief psychosis, buried the knife, prayed for forgiveness, retrieved it, and returned to his hotel room to read the scriptures of Psalm 57 for several hours. Dawn to sin. On January 12, 1997, Garavito killed an 8-year-old boy, during which time he killed 2 other minors. Almost all of the victims were boys, but local media reported that Garavit had also abused and killed female victims. In addition to his initial 172 murder charges, Garavito confessed to 28 more murders in 2003, 5 of which involved adults. All of the adult victims are believed to have been killed not to fulfill a personal fantasy, but to rid Garavito of potential witnesses. Garavito is also believed to have been active in Ecuador during the summer of 1998, and on July 20, 1998, he enabled Gustavo Roaviles, 14, a local shoeshine boy and casket seller, and 12-year-old Abel Gustavo Roaviles, 12, were killed. Jimmy Leonardo Palacios Antundia was killed in Sion, Ecuador. The 2 boys were from poor families and disappeared at noon. Garavito was later discovered at a girls' school in Santo Domingo, Ecuador, where she fled from Ecuadorian authorities who launched an arrest operation. 32, there they discovered 2 bodies, one of which was a young girl who had been raped, tortured, murdered, and discarded in a manner similar to Garavito's methods. 35, known for his strong Colombian accent. He was spotted by locals as a foreign castaway begging for money in July and August of that year. Additionally, Garavito said he is suspected of committing a murder in Venezuela. Some of his victims were also survived. In 1979, 9-year-old William Trujillo Mora was about to join other playing children, when Garavito seized Mora and hugging him and threatening to kill him if he screamed. Mora obliged, and he was escorted by Garavito to an abandoned building where he was sexually molested and tortured for 12 hours. When Garavito sensed that someone was near the house, he urged the child to remain silent. When Garavito lost consciousness from drinking, Mora managed to escape. In 1988, Garavito lured unidentified victims whom he sexually abused near a restaurant called El Arpaso in the Alto del Rio neighborhood of Quindíos, Calarca, and later found several bodies 20 meters away. Was discovered in after the January 25, 1999 earthquake. Authorities found the owner of the abandoned restaurant and pointed to Garavito, a long-time acquaintance whom they had avoided because of his drinking problem and aggressive tendencies. In the early 1990s, Garavito approached 10-year-old Carlos Alberto from the Circassian neighborhood of Quindío. Ms. Garavito offered her a gift and 200 pesos in return for her work and took Ms. Carlos to Alto de la Taza, where Ms. Carlos spoke friendly with the child. When Garavito arrived at a secluded hill, she held a knife to Carlos' throat before tying him up, raping him, and beginning to torture him. Then she asked if Garavito liked it. Feeling humiliated by her and afraid of Garavito, Carlos declares that he likes it, so Garavito says, "I'll see you next week," and leaves. "So, I hope you like it too." Brand Fernie Bernal Alvarez was a 16-year-old young man working in cockfighting with his father in the 1990s. As Bernal Alvarez was tending to the rooster in the cockpit, Garavito threatened him with a knife and took him to a secluded area. He then tied up, abused, and tortured Bernal Alvarez. The methods ranged from stabbing Bernal Alvarez 7 times with a screwdriver while raping him to beating a teenage boy. Bernal Alvarez was freed from bondage and fled Garavito. Garavito said he primarily targeted children from poor backgrounds, the working class, the homeless, farmers, and orphans. Garavito said he felt a force within him that drove him to commit murder, he claimed. He sought out children and lured them by bribing them with small gifts such as money, sweets, and chores. He typically abused thin children with soft features, light eyes, hair, and/or skin color, viewing them as innocent. Garavito was born and raised in Colombia's Paisa region, which has a large Spanish population. He knew where to find victims who met his criteria. Fearful of the dark, he approached them in broad daylight in public places, from the countryside to the crowded city streets. Garavito also drank brandy near the schoolyard in the evenings and waited for unsuspecting children. He offered easy jobs for money and even disguised himself as a variety of people, from Catholic priests to school teachers to old men, in order to more effectively lure his victims. To avoid raising suspicions about his activities, Garavito frequently changed his disguise. Once a child's trust is gained, Garavito usually takes the victim to a secluded location or mass grave and encourages them to talk about their private lives until they are tired and vulnerable, which makes them easier to deal with. After drinking half a bottle of brandy, Garavito tied up the children and threatened them with a knife while fondling and occasionally masturbating them. According to Garavito, he had made a contract with the devil, and that the killing of the children, an apparent blood sacrifice, involved satanic rituals. Children were often subjected to simultaneous abuse and torture over long periods of time. The methods range from stabbing the buttocks, hands, and feet with a screwdriver to skinning the buttocks with a broken blade that Garavito held between his fingers. While she was still alive, Garavito severed her genitals and placed them in her child's mouth. They were extensively beaten, burned, kicked, and often suffered deep cuts to their backs, stomachs, and necks. In some cases, they were sexually abused, including having their intestines drained from their stomachs, being penetrated through the anus and mouth, and being stabbed more than 100 times. Garavito's climax comes when he decapitates a child while it's still alive, or ultimately slits its throat before leaving severed genitals in the decapitated head's mouth. Sometimes necrophilia was also involved in the crime, including the corpse of the victim. Sometimes it was premature, as Garavito could only reach orgasm by punching or stabbing his victims during intercourse. The bodies of the children were all found naked, with bite marks and evidence of anal penetration. A container of lubricant and an empty bottle of Colombia's cheapest brandy were found near the body. Most of the bodies showed signs of prolonged torture. On November 7, 1998, a group of children playing soccer in Pereira discovered skeletal remains, but authorities did not pay much attention until November 15, when up to 36 children evidence of bondage and sexual acts was found in a mass grave of mostly boys. Assault and relentless torture. They found a total of 41 children in the Risaralda department, and 27 children in neighboring Valle del Cauca. This large number of missing children required a comprehensive investigation, as these murders were not localized to a particular area. Authorities deemed the brutality so horrific that they initially thought the killings might have been carried out by a satanic cult or an international child trafficking ring. Nevertheless, prosecutors soon suspected that the men may have been involved in the murders, as nylon cords and liquor bottle caps were frequently found at all crime scenes. On February 6, 1999, the naked bodies of 2 children were found side by side on a hill near a sugarcane field outside the town of Palmyra. The next day, they discovered the body of another child just a few meters away. All 3 bodies had their hands bound and there were signs of sexual abuse. The victim's neck was seriously injured and his back, genitals, legs, and buttocks were covered in bruises. The murder weapon was found in the same location as the body. Garavito, in a drunken state, passed out half naked over the corpse of a child, and the sugarcane field was set on fire. He suffered severe burns and left behind cash, burnt glasses, shorts, shoes, and underwear. A note with his receipt and Graciela Zabalita's address was also found. Based on his glasses, authorities were able to determine that the local serial killer was middle-aged and had astigmatism in his left eye. His shoes showed that he had a limp and that his height was between 163 and 167 centimeters. They mistakenly arrested a local sex offender named Pedro Pablo Ramirez Garcia, 44, who was limping on his right leg. When 2 boys went missing in Pereira, one boy identified Garcia as the man who tried to attack him. He remained in prison until more children disappeared in Bogota. Meanwhile, lead detective Aldemar Duran begins to suspect Garavito as a wanted murderer. He was contacted by Garavito's girlfriend. She told police she hadn't seen him in months. However, she gave police a black cloth suitcase belonging to Garavito, which contained some of his belongings. These items included a photo of the boy, a detailed diary of the murder, a victim tally, and an invoice. This new information led them to Garavito's mansion, but the compound was empty. Investigators believed Garavito was either traveling for work or looking for his next victim. Garcia was released after Duran was able to locate Garavito's girlfriend and her sister. Garavito was picked up by the local police just a few days later on an unrelated charge of attempted rape against 12-year-old Jean Yvon Sabogal. On April 22, 1999, Garavito was drinking brandy in the evening when he encountered Sabogal selling lottery tickets in the city of Villavicencio. Garavito was arrested a few days later by local police on an unrelated charge of attempted rape of 12-year-old Jean Yvon Sabogal. On April 22, 1999, Garavito was drinking brandy in the evening when he met Sabogal, who was selling lottery tickets in the town of Villavicencio. Garavito introduced himself as local politician Bonifacio Morello Lescano and grabbed Sabogal with a knife to silence him. Garavito pretended to hug Sabogal, put him in a taxi, and forced him over a barbed wire fence leading up to a remote hill. At this location, Garavito began tying Sabogal while repeatedly shouting, "Am I a sadist?" He then teased the child with a knife and shouted various obscenities while Sabogal masturbated on top of him. His 16-year-old homeless boy was close enough to hear Garavito and the child fighting. The teenagers started taunting Garavito and throwing rocks at him. Garavito chased the teenager with a dagger. Both boy and boy fled to the Rosa Blanca farmhouse on Via La Coralina in Villavicencio, where they met a 12-year-old girl. Garavito then arrived at the farmhouse and aggressively asked the girl for directions. She led Garavito into the forest, where he got lost. Police were contacted and a search began. Authorities found Garavito coming out of the woods around 7 p.m. They called on angry locals not to take part in the search. He gave them false identification documents and impersonated the politician Liscano. Nevertheless, they suspected the man to be Garavito anyway. On July 4, 1999, her suspicions were confirmed. Garavito's confession was not enough for Colombia's Ministry of Justice. Garavito had a rare eye disease that only occurs in men of a certain age group. His glasses were designed specifically for his unique condition. These special glasses were found at crime scenes. Garavito also left behind a brandy bottle, underwear, and shoes. The victim's DNA was found along with other artifacts. Police have ordered vision tests throughout the prison where Garavito is being held, and the results will help police adjust Garavito's glasses. Requiring it for all prisoners alleviated Garavito's suspicions and discouraged him from lying about his eyesight. His height of 165 centimeters and limp were also important in his relationship to the findings. While Garavito was out of his cell, investigators took his DNA samples from his pillow and living area. DNA found on the victim matched DNA found in Garavito's cell. Garavito is confirmed to have murdered at least 193 minors in total, making him the most prolific serial killer and child molester in modern history. If his 2003 confession is to be believed, his murders of 23 minors and 5 adults would raise his murder victim count to 221. He was found guilty on 138 of 172 charges. Others are still running. Garavito was sentenced to 1,853 years and 9 days in prison, the longest sentence in Colombian history. However, Colombian law limits prison sentences to 40 years, which was further reduced to 22 years because Garavito helped police search for the victim's body. Garavito served his sentence in a maximum security prison in Valledupar, El Cesar Department, Colombia. He was kept separate from all other prisoners as it was feared he would be killed soon. He was supposed to be eligible for parole in 2023 after completing 3/5 of his sentence. In 2021, a judge rejected Garavito's request for early release, citing his good behavior in prison and not paying the victim's fine. Garavito made clear accusations against Colombian Senator Carlos Moreno de Caro that he would enter the Colombian Congress, become a Pentecostal priest and minister, and marry a woman, denying that he was an avowed homosexual. Even after announcing his plans, he remained hopeful. Garavito suffered from severe eye cancer and leukemia, leaving him blind, weak, and fatigued, and requiring daily blood transfusions. He spent most of his time making handcuffs, earrings, and necklaces in the medical department of Valledupar's prison. A psychiatrist diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder. Garavito died at a hospital in Valledupar on October 12, 2023, at the age of 66. Many Colombians criticized the possibility of Garavito's early release. In recent years, Colombians have come to feel that Garavito's sentence was not sufficient punishment for his crimes. Some argued he deserved life in prison or the death penalty, but that's not the case in Colombia. Colombian law does not provide for any provision or method of imposing a longer sentence than the one Garavito received, which is a flaw in the law considering the fact that the possibility of a serial killer does not exist in Colombian society. It was thought that the law now increases the maximum penalty for such crimes to 60 years in prison. Journalist Guillermo Prieto, Pili, La Lata interviewed Garavito on a program that aired on June 11, 2006. Mr. Piri said during the interview Mr. Garavito tried to downplay his actions and expressed his intention to pursue a career in politics to help abused children. Mr. Piri also described Mr. Garavito's prison conditions, noting that given his good behavior, he could apply for early release within 3 years. As we close the chapter on Luis Garavito's haunting saga, we're reminded of the sobering realities within our society's darkest corners. If you found this exploration both compelling and eye-opening, remember to hit the like button below and share your thoughts in the comments. For more bone-chilling accounts of history's most notorious crimes, make sure to subscribe to Rotten Crimes and turn on notifications, so you never miss an episode. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps shed light on the importance of understanding the depths of human darkness. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Until next time, stay vigilant, and may the echoes of these tales serve as a catalyst for a safer and more informed world.